Hey guys, how's it going? Hope everything is going great for you today, and I have a little treat for you. It is a side-by-side comparison of a standard Gillette 195 adjustable called a Fatboy and a Gillette 195 adjustable bottom dial. And as you can see, this is a regular Fatboy and this is a bottom dial. I took some measurements and I went to compare them. It's not going to be really in depth. I'm not taking either of these razors apart, but I thought that I would give you a rundown of some basic differences that seem to make a huge difference, in my opinion, in not just how they feel, but also how they shave and how they perform. So the very first factor that you'll notice when you pick up a bottom dial is it weighs more than a regular Fatboy. And the difference is actually this one here, this regular Fatboy, is 79 grams. And this bottom dial is 86 grams. So that's a difference of 7 grams in the razor. And you can actually really feel that when you pick these two up side by side. It's like picking up a 5-pound weight and then picking up a 10-pound weight. You can really tell the difference. There's just a lot more heft in this razor here in the bottom dial. You'll also notice that there's a couple cosmetic differences. First of all, the TTO knob on each of them is a little bit different. This bottom dial has a shorter TTO knob than this regular 195 does. That's because the adjuster ring is right here, this collar. You'll also notice that there's a difference in collars. If you take a look, there's actually a pretty big difference. This collar here is tapered on this upper end, and this collar here is not. This collar here is actually a bit wider too, as it extends past the handle than the regular 195 adjustable was. You'll also notice that this is held in place by a little spring that stops. Let me see if I can get the light on that. Yeah, the light's reflecting, but there's a little spring and it stops because that collar, the adjuster collar, is actually notched from 9 all the way down to 1, and there's this little there's this portion right here that sort of sticks up to keep it from going past that spring. That's not how the 195 adjustable standard Fatboy works. It's just a smooth banded collar all the way around the top from 1 to 9, and there's grooves in there that cause the spring to stop that you can't see. So it's maybe a little bit more streamlined than the bottom dial, but I think that the bottom dial actually looks a bit neater, but that's just my opinion. But then if you come up along the handle here, you'll notice that the actual handle portion is longer, which makes up for the shorter TTO knob. What they figured, I guess, was guys are going to be holding it like this. They're not going to be holding it by the TTO knob. But I guess the exact opposite of that is true, because when you hold it, I never touch the adjuster knob on this when I'm holding it, whereas with this razor, you pretty much have to touch the adjuster knob to hold it. So just a couple differences there. Now, if you open these up and take a look, the first thing that you should notice is the heads are very different, and they're different in a couple ways. If you take a look at the standard 195 adjustable, the standard Fatboy, the portion here that is what some people call the comb or the bar, okay, you can see that right in the video, right inside the door there. That head continues to go across and straight down over here. the blade is actually retained by these 4 rectangular pieces of metal that form the base plate or the razor plate that come through the actual head. And you can see that underneath. You can see that in this little portion that comes along here and goes up. That's actually the base plate for the head. And when you adjust the razor, that is what adjusts. And what it does is it raises these little metal portions up through the head. So when you close it, what you can't see is, let's see if you can actually see it. You can see those four little pieces of metal there. When you close it, they actually come up, and that's what gives you your blade exposure. Because that, well, actually that sort of stays the same, but the guard bars come down, and that's what gives you your different blade exposures whenever you switch from 1 to 9. Now, if you take a look at the bottom dial, it does not have those 4 little rectangular pieces of metal that come straight up. It has this other part, which is actually sitting on top of the head, and when you lower that, the blade rests on it, but when you lower it, you can actually see the guard bars rising and lowering, changing the exposure. And that is how this razor works. And it actually supports the razor all the way along. I don't know if I would say more evenly, because surface-wise, surface area, you actually probably get more surface area between the base plate and the razor blade. You probably get more surface area coverage here than you do here. So with this razor, more of that base plate stays in contact with the head, but I don't know that it makes much difference. I think that it's sort of immaterial at this point, because you still have a lot of coverage here too. So let's just get down to a few measurements. And one of the things that you'll notice if you ever have the chance to hold one of these in your hand, one of the things that you'll notice is, I don't know about you, but I think that this bottom dial looks a little bit longer. And I actually was talking to Caleb Allen about that, because this is Caleb Allen's razor. He and Reed found this in the wild, and he sent it to me for a look and for a shave. And if you take a look, I think that they look longer. But when you hold them up, you say they are exactly the same size. That's not true. The overall length of the standard 195 adjustable is 87 millimeters, and the overall length of the bottom dial is 89. So this bad boy here has the regular old Fatboy beat by about 2 millimeters. Also, if you take a look at the handles, this handle is 1/4 of a millimeter wider than the Fatboy, and this is 12 millimeters. This is 12.25 millimeters. Also, if you take a look at what I call the head depth, which is the distance from comb to comb, that's the depth of the head. Okay, if you take a look at that, the regular Fatboy sits at exactly 25, and this one actually sits at 25.75, which is 3/4 of a millimeter longer, wider, deeper, whatever you want to call it, than the standard. I will say this: I got an incredibly smooth shave out of this, and I attribute that possibly to the extra width of the head, protecting you a little bit more from the blade. Now, you might say, oh, well, that'll make it a less aggressive razor. It'll make it a milder razor. But that's actually not where you get aggression. The width of the head and the amount of comb that you have, that's this, the amount of guard bar that you have is actually what makes a head smooth or not. It does not have anything to do with the aggressiveness of the razor. The aggressiveness has to do with the amount of blade that is exposed. And if you take a look at, once again, in here, if you take a look from where these little rectangular blade beds are, the base plate, okay, versus this base plate, if you take a look at the width of those, the depth of those, so from this point to that point, okay, it's 18 millimeters for a standard Fatboy. This one is 18.5. So what you have is, you have actually less blades sticking out or hanging out of the side of this one, because it's actually a wider razor head in that regard. But that's, once again, that's not where you get aggression from, because the aggressiveness of a razor is based in your blade gap, which is the gap between the openings here that the blade comes through from the bottom of the guard all the way up to where the blade actually comes out. And what I did was I measured these two. I measured them with an actual blue blade, which is the blade that they would have been designed to receive, and I measured them. I measured the blade exposure on both 1 and 9 for this one, and also 1 and 9 for this one. And if you take a look at the actual blade exposure, what you'll see is there's I think, a really, really big difference. We're talking about 0.1 millimeter, 1/10 of a millimeter, makes a noticeable difference that you can feel as you are shaving. Now, if you take this one, on setting number 1 for a standard Fatboy, the blade exposure is 0.5. It's half a millimeter. If you crank it all the way to 9, it goes up to 1.1 millimeters. In other words, that's 1 1/10 millimeter. So between settings 1 and setting 9, you have a difference of over half a millimeter, 0.6 millimeters. If you take a look at this bottom dial on the same scale, on setting number 1, you have 0.75 or 3/4 of a millimeter of blade exposure. If you crank it all the way to 9, you have 1.3. So that's not quite a difference of 0.6 millimeters, but it's very similar in difference to this. But the difference between these two is huge, because you have a full 1/4 of a millimeter more exposure on setting number 1 with the bottom dial than you do with the standard Fatboy. And you have 0.2 millimeter difference between setting number 9 on the bottom dial and setting number 9 on the Fatboy, the regular Fatboy. So what you're getting is, you're getting almost a 1/4 millimeter more blade exposure, which means this is a lot more aggressive of a razor, but actually works out to be a milder shave, because you have more comb overhang to protect your skin. So you're getting a lot more exposure, so that the blade really cuts through a lot more hair, but you're getting a lot more protection from this razor also. One of the smoothest shaves I've ever had in my life was with this bottom dial. So love it, absolutely love it. Super close shave, no irritation, and I normally don't get much irritation with my Fatboy, my regular Fatboy, but awesome, awesome razor. I'm not going to take these apart. There is video source out there. if you want to see one of these things taken apart, I would not even venture to do that with a razor that belonged to me, let alone a razor that belonged to somebody else. So, with that, I will bid you a fond farewell, wish you a good day, a good day, not a good Dave, and I'll say, shave on.